Rhianan Rudd was the youngest British girl ever prosecuted as a terrorist. But charges were dropped after the government concluded she was a victim of exploitation. Placed in a children's home, she took her own life last year.
My baby girl in there.
The case of Rhianan Rudd raises questions about how the UK deals with the problem of children involved in extremism. Rhianan was born in Essex and later moved with her mother to Derbyshire. This is her first interview.
She was just a lovely girl. You know, she wasn't horrible in any way. She had a hard time building relationships with people. She had some friends, but she tried to make herself fit in with them rather than being herself. So she struggled in life, yeah.
Age 14, she became absorbed by right-wing extremism, including talking to older people online.
She became very withdrawn, very secretive. Like you'd say to her, what you've been doing upstairs? Oh, nothing. Where before she'd be like, oh, I was searching on Etsy, I was doing this, I was doing that. She wasn't racist at all. And then all of a sudden, she didn't like blacks, didn't like Jews, didn't like anybody that wasn't white. If you didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes and, you know, Aryan, as they say, she didn't want to know you. You were an inferior race, you shouldn't have been alive.
This man, neo-Nazi Christopher Cook, was grooming and sexually exploiting Rhianan over the internet. From his home in the US, Cook was at the centre of an elaborate terrorist plot to attack the US power grid. He targeted the young for radicalisation. We found Cook was also in contact with the then partner of Rhiannan's mother, who'd met him via a pen pal system for prisoners. American Dax Maliburn had been part of a white supremacist prison gang but claimed to have changed. The evidence shows he also had an influence on Rhianan. In one message, Cook told Maliburn, "You need to teach her the right way." Maliburn moved back to the US 2 years ago.
I was checking on her computer because she was spending a lot of time up there.
At that time, Rhiannan's mother says she had become increasingly alarmed and one day reached out for help.
She came down and she went, "Mum, I've downloaded a PDF." And I was like, "Okay, what of?" And she went, "How to build a bomb." And I went, "What?" And I went, "You can't do that, Rhi. You cannot do that." And then the following day, I filled in a form online for a thing called Prevent.
Prevent is the government's de-radicalisation programme. But Rhianan was barely involved in the scheme because within weeks she was arrested.
My friend called me and said, "Emily, I think you need to come home." And I said, "What for?" She went, "There's a few police officers around your house." And when we turned up, there was 19 police officers surrounding my house to arrest my little girl. And this police officer read out this list of crimes that Rhianan had supposedly committed.
Terrorism offences?
Yes, yes. My first thought was, you've brought all these police officers to arrest my little girl who's 14 years old. She's only 5 foot and weighs 7 stone.
Rhianan then spent over 6 months on bail. During police interviews, she described exploitation by male extremists. As a terrorism suspect, the de-radicalisation scheme Prevent would no longer engage with her. At home, she self-harmed and tried to run away. Her mother says she lacked the support needed to watch Rhianan 24 hours a day. Eventually, she was put in care by Derbyshire County Council and charged with terrorism offences for allegedly possessing weapon-making guides. At that stage, defence lawyers became involved and wanted Rhianan referred to a specialist government unit here in the Home Office, which considers whether people are victims of trafficking and exploitation under modern slavery laws. A referral was then made by the local council, not the police. It took a further 7 months for the decision to be made. She's seen here performing on stage during that time. When the official assessment came in late 2021, it concluded she had been exploited. The prosecution was abandoned. Her mother thinks she should never have been charged.
You know, they can go in and search the house, obviously go in, search the house and everything that they need to do. But when they realise, oh, hang on a minute, you know, this isn't a full-on terrorist here. This is somebody that's been talked into this, groomed in many ways. They should have absolutely dealt with it differently, completely differently. They should have seen her as a victim rather than a terrorist. You know, she's a child, an autistic child, and she should have been treated as a child that had been groomed and sexually exploited.
We found the authorities had been passed evidence of what had been happening. An FBI investigation into Chris Cook had seized images and messages showing the extremist grooming and sexual exploitation of Rhianan. The FBI passed the material to the security service MI5 6 months before Rhianan was charged. Debates about trafficking and exploitation are also live in immigration cases involving young women who are appealing the removal of their British citizenship after they went to Syria to join ISIS.
ISIS ruined people's lives.
In the case of Shamima Begum, who travelled aged 15, the government has argued against claims of trafficking and said she's a security threat. Her lawyers say she was trafficked and sexually exploited. Rhianan Rudd is part of a trend of growing numbers of children, often involved in online right-wing extremism, being investigated by MI5 and the police. Convictions in the past 2 years include this Cornish boy who led his own online terror cell aged 14, and a boy from Darlington arrested when he was 13. Do you think your daughter was a terrorist?
No. I felt, you know, she was a child who fixated on things, and when they fixate on something, she would just take it in like a sponge. And because she was taking it in like a sponge, she was changing herself. And that's not Rhianan.
So if it wasn't that, it might have been something else that she would have been fixated on.
Well, before that, she was fixated on My Little Pony.
Our investigation has also examined the care provided to Rhianan by Derbyshire County Council and the private children's home where she was placed. It's run by Blue Mountain Homes. Rhianan chose to stay in the home after the charges were dropped. She engaged with the Prevent De-Radicalisation scheme, but there were indications she was not okay. In the weeks before her death, Rhianan asked her mother to help her contact a neo-Nazi in the US. Her mother reported it to the home, but says she was then told that social services and the police had decided to let contact take place. It's unclear if it did. Her mother had warned Derbyshire Council about the risk of Rhianan taking her own life. In emails to the council in 2021, she wrote, "I do hope my daughter doesn't get the big itch to kill herself in her room where no one can see her." She stated that Rhianan had access to ligatures. Rhianan took her own life in her room in May last year.
Yeah, well, I see her on the Sunday before she died, and her eyes looked dead, which is completely not Rhianan. And I said to her, "Are you okay?" And she just looked at me and she went, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I thought, "No, you're not." And I knew she went. And before she went, she gave me a hug, which is quite unusual for Rhi, because she'd hug you, but not the way she did that day. And she hugged me and she looked at me and she went, Mum, I'll see you soon. And I went, yeah, I'll see you on Wednesday. And she went, I'll see you soon. And she left, and it just didn't feel right. Everything about the last bit with her just didn't feel right. So on the Monday, I called and I spoke to the manager and I said, there's something wrong. Please watch her. She's going to do something. Please watch her. Talk to her. Find out. And she said, yes, we'll talk to her. Don't worry. We'll find out what's going on. Next thing I know, on the Thursday, I've got 3 police officers standing in my living room telling me that my daughter died by hanging.
In Rhiannon's room, access to items that could be used as a ligature were banned due to the risk of self-harm and suicide, but she gained access to one. She was found dead over 12 hours after she retired to her room the night before.
I think she should have been put into a proper mental health facility so she could have got the proper mental health help. She needed to be somewhere that they understood what she was going through mentally. She needed to be somewhere that was right for her.
Counter-terrorism investigations involving children are complex and challenging. A young person can be both a victim of exploitation and a threat to others. How the authorities tackle the issue is under increased scrutiny. The senior lawyer responsible for reviewing how terrorism powers are used says changes are needed in the approach to some children.
I think there is a question, is the normal criminal justice route actually an effective way of managing the risk? And to illustrate that, in 2020 and 2021, only one child who committed a terrorism offence went to prison. All of the other ones were eventually given non-custodial sentences, which does beg the question whether the sort of traditional route of investigate, arrest, prosecute, send someone to prison for a long time is really effective for these sorts of offences committed by children. And I think there's room for developing a new legal instrument that would allow the police to say to the child, we're either going to prosecute you, or you can accept this injunction, which would, for example, it would limit your mobile phone use. It might require you to have monitoring software. It might require you not to delete your history. It certainly would require you to have some sort of engagement with a mentor or someone, and perhaps some support as well. And that could be done really quickly and keep them out of the criminal justice system altogether.
There will be an inquest into Rhiannon's death. The organisations we approached with our findings said they can't comment until the inquest has concluded.